No, I told him. So, do not try this at home.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I'm Dorinda Moore, and this is Leslie A. Letter, and we're your stunt peer group governors. Excited to be here today to talk about playing with fire, the evolution of stunts in fire. We have some great panelists with us today, and Leslie, why don't you introduce them?
And the early risers in California, of course, we're up, getting up early. Um, well, we have Al Jones, a veteran stuntman, and Brett Jones, which is his son, second generation stuntman. We also have Jason Domenico with Action Factory stunt. Jason and the Action Factory has established themselves as one of the industry's leaders and innovative when it comes to fire and safety. They're constantly raising the bar in protective gear and fire design. And then last but not least, we have Raleigh Ilram, stunt coordinator from the epic Game of Thrones series. Thank you all for being here. So excited to focus today on our favorite kind of stunts and fire.
Yeah, welcome guys, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we've got shout outs across the board. We have everybody watching from Atlanta, New York, the UK, Texas. Like you said, our late risers in Cali. 11 a.m. is a hard time to wake up, but we did it. So let's just kind of open this up, Al. Al, our veteran stunt guy that's been doing stunts for over 50, what is it, 55 years now?
That's correct.
Yeah,
55.
welcome, guys. Welcome.
Good to be here.
So, Al, since we're talking about the evolution of stunts, we wanted to bring somebody in and to start it all off. I think we have a couple of clips that show, fire stunts started even during the black and white days. I know that first clip that we saw was just nothing but smoke, which is pretty funny. But even in the silent films, we had the use of fire. So tell me a little bit about some of the things that you remember as far as the how stunts started or fire stunts started.
Oh, this predates you. Yeah. I think.
So Al,
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I know you get mesmerized in
involved.
watching it that you forget.
Yeah, I got involved with fire because a lot of people, a lot of stunt guys were starting to do burns, even though they've been going on for years. They got a little more uh, sophisticated, and more people were called to do them. So I started playing with it a little bit myself, and then I got a call to do uh, putting some burns on a movie, and then I really had to go out and experiment and try to find out exactly what was safe and what was not safe.
Sure.
So I came up with some things on my own, and I would ask questions from some of the older stunt guys, and then I did my first burn. I think my first burn on a movie called Demonoid, and it was a little frightening, but I was pretty well prepared, as much as I could be back in those days, uh, and it worked out good. I mean, it worked out good, and then I started getting calls to do more fire burns, and of course I would, as they progressed, I would get a little more into them, and I thought made them a lot safer.
So
Can
tell
I
me, as you
can oh sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I
I
have
was
I
gonna
have a
say,
few questions. I love this topic, and so I'm tickled pink to be able to talk to you about the origins of fire and who you worked with and the shows and those setups. Who were the people that that kind of gave you some of the tips early on when you started? These people are kind of the pioneers as well, and I'm extremely interested in knowing who those people were and what some of their techniques were. Because at the time, if I'm not mistaken, the early fire stunts, they were all dry burns because we have the progression of dry burn to wet burn to naked burn, and those were all dry burns at the time. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that's correct. Of course there was no jail around until the Austrian jail came out, but we all were. I think the big thing was as you tried not to uh, perspire, you didn't want to do anything to get the body down because it was the heat that was going to burn you and not the fire. So the big thing was try to keep yourself quiet and calm, and um, uh, and then put on stuff that I mean there were some fire suits around. There were fire suits around, and I try. And you had the mask, and they had the faces, but you had to come up with your own
They were
little
they were
plan.
the big
Okay, what?
they were the big suits, right? With they have like it was almost like a deep diver's helmet where they'd have to open it and close it. I think that there's what Dig Zeiker did a big burn where they actually had to yell for him to go down because he couldn't hear. His head was kind of
Yeah,
encompassed in this thing. Is it the same type of suit, right?
that's true. But I think um, it wasn't long because those suits become kind of obsolete because you couldn't hide them. Number one. And I think more and more people, like as you said before, Tony Caesar started coming up with some things that you could put under your clothing. And then I got involved with some stuff that would kind of fire retardant stuff that I could treat the clothes with. And
Mhm.
I started treating all my clothing with it. It was known as silica soda, and you buy it at paint
Mhm.
stores, silica sodium, and and you would treat your clothes with it. And I don't know. I think the construction workers used it on some of the stuff, but it seemed to work for me. And so the big thing was a lot of us didn't have fire suits, and the fire suit was sort of gaudy, and they didn't seem to work for a lot of people. So I myself, along with I think Zeiker and I think Tony Caesar and those guys started to play around with other stuff.
Yeah,
yeah, I
that's
think
great. So
right.
really,
So
you're the progression of fire. If you were to break it down, like that's what I'm hearing is that we started with the biggest, best suits and maybe the Nomex felt, and then you were able to slim that down and make it look more realistic, more believable. At the time, they just had to light the guy on fire so big that you couldn't see how big the suit was, but then you were able to make it like slim that down, make it more realistic. Is that all correct?
Yeah, I did. I came up. I don't know why, but I came up with the idea that cotton full cotton sweats which was worn by a lot of people in summer and winter,
Yeah. In the
would
military. The military made it
in the military would only
popular.
they would not use synthetic uniforms, and they were involved in a lot of fires. So I started buying 100% cotton sweats, and when I would put those on underneath my fire retardant clothing, they seemed to keep the heat out. Keeping in mind that unlike some of the burns that you guys do today, a long burn back in those days for me was probably under 15 seconds, 18 seconds. And so you had to map everything out with the director and the producer to let him know this is all you can do. And then you would have your safety guy, usually a special effects guy, or maybe one stunt guy standing off camera. And the other thing was very important, and I'll bring this up. A lot of people, when they do these stunts, a lot of people have their adrenaline flow. Well, as you know, as a stunt performer, when your adrenaline flows heavily, you don't feel a lot of pain until it's over. So
Right.
when I would set a fire stunt up, I would warn the person doing it, if you feel any heat whatsoever, any type of heat, you go down and we'll put you out. And that was the same thing with me. If I felt heat, I'd have people standing off camera, and the minute I hit the ground, they would put me out because, as you know, very seldom is the flame burns you, it's the heat that burns you. And so
Right.
I
And that's
think,
a good that's actually a good point. Is it you were saying earlier we were having like we had a side conversation before this even started, and you were saying that you'd put talcum powder or powder to absorb your sweat so that you didn't get a steam burn because the radiant heat in the material or the residual heat that's built up in the material would actually steam your sweat and then burn you. Is that right?
Yeah. Also, too, water conducts a lot
yeah,
quicker than
yeah.
dry, so the heat is able to actually get through the clothing as well faster. And it was all, yeah, I used a lot of baby powder, talcum powder, whatever, because I know the first, even he was way before me, but even the first probably 2 or 3 burns I did dry, and it was a lot of baby powder, and you just didn't want to. You got to minimize the sweat because it wasn't so much the sweat on your skin; it would leach into your clothes like gel would,
Right.
and it would leach out, and then you just create this super high wave of heat to your body.
Right.
And
So
we
Wow.
have
Al,
we have
Oh,
a
that's
stunt
come
guy.
up with all this?
I'm sorry.
Al, how did you come up
We
with
have we had a
all
couple of stunt
the
guys.
different? I'm sorry.
We had I'm sorry. We had a couple of stunt guys were actually burned a little bit because they were perspiring heavily, and from what I understand, I won't, and the heat actually burned them, and so you learn. Everybody's learned from someone else, and it's just you can't, number one, go too long, and number two, you have to try to keep the heat away from the body, and that's where I came up with the cotton sweats, which seemed to work for me, and that's what I started using for the next 8 or 10 burns. I used cotton sweats, and and they would seem to work.
hmm
Wow.
But the downside to using cotton sweats, and I guess also to kind of speaking to the audience, is that they're not fire resistant in any way, and they can burn once your treated costume is burned through. They can obviously burn the sweats, and it's an issue. So is that the transition then from dry burns getting into wet burns? Is that more or less is that the bridge there?
Well, one thing he did do that I remember, he always wore 2 sets of wardrobe, and so he'd only treat both sets with the silica soda. He'd only paint the outside of the one. Um, so again, that's why the burns had to be, because you're right. That's why the burns had to be fairly quick compared to what we do now. He would by the time the first set burn off, he was going down,
Mhm.
and it wouldn't. The fire would never actually get the flame itself would never actually get to the sweats. So
Right.
that's why he had to
So
keep the
because
burn.
there was no at that time, was this predating like 1964, 1965, or is this after the fact? And was there Nomex available at the time and it was just not widely used, or was it only at the time used for the space program?
It was known, but a lot of us didn't have it, and I didn't feel like just having a layer of Nomax on next to my body was going to deter the heat like
Right.
sweats would, because as you know they're thick, and I put 2 sets of wardrobe on uh, because the top set would be painted with rubber cement, and like Brett was saying, that by the time I got burned through, And that silica soda worked really well. And by the time it burned through, we'd be down. But the sweat seemed to for me, keep the heat out better than the Nomax. So it worked for me. That's what I started using. I'm not sure anybody else felt that way, but that's what I started using.
Okay. You touched on the silica that you were using, the silica soda, yes? If I'm,
Yeah,
did I get that right? Okay. So, and that's a fire block, so it's just a treatment of the clothing. And I wanted to kind of pull that out specifically because we had an accident, and if I'm not mistaken, it led to the Taurus Foundation, or at least the inception of the Taurus Foundation, because there was an allergic reaction. We went from silica of soda, using it on the wardrobe, to a product. They're all fire retardants, and they were used in construction or for theater to treat the curtains and for furniture at the time. And then they went and they started using a chemical called C24/6, at least here in California, and I think it was here in the United States. Uh, it was later on outlawed, but we had an accident with C24/6 because it used to be kind of a common practice that right before a burn, usually a effects person would come over with a Hudson sprayer and spray this treatment on wardrobe in a damp form. And one of the girls ended up inhaling it, and she had an allergic reaction because the chemical was a bit volatile in regards to allergies, and she ended up having some serious issues that it later on had to be resolved, I think, in court, and she was no longer able to do stunts after that. And after that, they outlawed. There were several reasons for it, but they outlawed C24/6 and started using C199. We now use different products, kind of like this product here, but that was the early stages of treating clothes. And I'm just pointing this out really quick because that made us aware of some of the chemicals that we have around us and how dangerous they can be. It's not just the fire that can get you; it can be the chemicals around you, including the fuels.
yes,
If I remember correctly, too, with what you were talking about, Jason, was that the other thing they do, not only did the clothes get sprayed, but it got on the stunt woman's skin.
it did.
I remember talking
Yes.
to Tony Caesar about this like many years ago, and part of the problem with the chemicals as well. I think he said, and I gotta hope I'm not misquoting this, but it was a vasoconstrictor, so it actually messed with the molecule, the skin, and it also helped. She didn't react well to it. I've had this stuff on me wet. Is it my understanding that it's not any more effective than water in a way when it's wet? It needs to be dry.
Hmm.
But it's just this is why we talk about the evolution of things and technology. The first fire suits were probably were asbestos. Obviously we don't want that around us anymore, and just things just keep getting better and better. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
Nomex came into the car racing world in the '60s because people were getting burned up. So somebody had to come up with a plan to. They invented some flame, fire retardant underwear that keep it safer. And that's everything. Every sport, and stunts is basically a sport that the technology just gets better and better all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
I think we have a clip,
Nomax
Jason.
came.
I
Yeah.
think we have a clip, Jason, of Brett. Matter of fact, I think it's one of the clips that you put him on fire for the Mentalist. So, and it was an example, I think, where you were saying if you listen, you can say that when he's getting hot. Let's watch this.
He's wet. Action sideways.
That was a
Yeah,
big burn if I recall, and it was
but
you were chained to the table, unable to move around. Is that right, Brett?
yeah. So the setup, the scenario was I'm handcuffed to an interrogation to a table in an interrogation room. The actors come in and find me on fire. They don't see what sets me on fire, but I had to be on fire long enough for the stunt coordinator, who's also John Brannigan, who was playing the part, to go run out of the room, grab a fire extinguisher, come back in, and put me out. So you set me up, and because I can't move around, all that heat is just radiating around me. So I wasn't really handcuffed. We left the chain long. I had handcuffs on my wrist, but I left the chain wild, so it just ran through the hook. So if I had to get away, I just let go of the chain. I could pull away, which is why I was able to get away. And you always said, just if you get hot, stay hot, and we'll come get you. Of course, I got hot quick behind my And
You had to do
my
it
ears.
again? Did you do it more than once?
I did, because what happened was, once I got tapped on the back of the neck, Jason, and this was my first time. This was in 2010, and this was my first time. Jason and Joe Ross, his partner, put some of their skin gel on me and layered it up. And I'm telling you, I was able to do this 2 or 3 more times without a
Action
problem.
assignment.
This, as we watch this, it's interesting, and I don't mind talking about why we've changed protocols and policies. This taught us a lot, because it was a fairly common type of burn to get, where the collar will rub the gel away from the neck. So we loaded it there that day, but later on after that, we were able to develop a process where we actually take our heat shield material here, and we cut out a patch and we gel it and we put it on the back of the neck, and that keeps the collar from being able to rub away the protective gel. We also do it with the ears. And since then, the back of the neck, the ears really have not been an issue with the open face burns like that.
I remember whenever I did one of my first burns that we would put the gel in ice, and it was so freezing.
Oh yes.
You would put a layer of Nomex on, and I mean, you would
You were
be
praying
so ready
to
for them to put you on fire because you were sitting there shaking and shivering. It was just incredible how
Yeah,
cold
during
it was.
we have
Yeah.
And
during that, so we could put the your next burn or your burn, your whole head was on lit on fire, correct? Yes.
yeah, yeah, that was for I
Say
think
say again.
Flight of the Living Dead. I, so hey,
Yes.
there we go. Yeah, we were just talking about the freezing and being so cold from the Nomex being in the ice, and that was probably one of the worst things about um, this time of doing some of the fire burns was that, like I said, you were literally freezing to death, really wanting them to put you on fire. And like you say, Al, it seemed
I,
like
I
the difference between the burns that we see today, which seem to go on forever, like Rally with some of the stuff that we've seen you guys do. Um, you're right,
Well,
Al. We used to have to make our burns quite a bit quicker.
well, in fact, they're actually not as long as you think. So I have a limit of 20 seconds from ignition to being put out for all of our burns. And if you see any of the behind the scenes stuff, you'll see that once we call action, we do a countdown as well, so that the performer knows where he is within the burn. Because I know back in the day, particularly when fire burns were a little bit rare, there was this kind of will to try and squeeze as much time out of the burn. But I don't feel that necessarily gives you the best performance, because often the performer is now concerned about holding their breath and avoiding flame for an extended period of time. So we reduce the length of time they're actually alight. But what we also do, going to your point of getting cold, what my performers now do is they wear a 3 mil wetsuit next to the skin, with 3 layers of soaked cold gel, with a rain suit over the top. And what this does, it insulates the cold gel in between two waterproof barriers, which means the performer still has body warmth and can still move and perform and think straight. But we don't have the gel either soaking into the skin or soaking into the costume or fire suit. What this also does as well is, because often, you know, with an extended burn, you set someone on fire and you've wrecked the costume, you've wrecked probably the boiler suit that's protecting the underlayers, and there may be an issue with a camera, then something hasn't worked how the director wants it. So what we've done by using a wetsuit, three layers of gelled underwear, then a rain suit, and minimizing the burns to between 15 and 20 seconds, it means that we very often can go for take 2 and take 3 simply by re-gelling the flammable gel onto the performer. That way we get much more bang for our buck, and the performers like it because they obviously get paid each time they get set on fire.
which we like.
It's always a
Yes,
good thing.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, and Jason, kind of talking about the different layers. What is your what's your technique? What do you do as far as layering?
So the gel is kind of the magic component, and our gel is meant to be used at like 72, 75 degrees, like room temperature. Um, Off the record, I actually warm my gel up and put it on so that it's nice and toasty, because often it seems like we're getting into those burns like early morning or late, and we want to keep it as thin as possible. And so we found that just 3 layers, 2 layers of the heat shield here, and then 1 layer of PBI, a thin PBI, will give us the thinnest protection, but also get us into the 15 to 20 second realm. We always say 15, and it gives a 5 second buffer. But it's as thin as you can get, and it's not. And so that's our process. I'm happy to demonstrate it here. Actually, I have a couple of things that are I have like just sleeves, and I can show you actually what we're talking about. We don't
Love
use
it.
a
Yeah,
rain
let's do
chip
it.
per se. We actually sell this product. It's called Frog Tog. It's a very thin paper material that is actually covered in like a plastic. And if you guys can hand me the sleeves, I'll just light myself on fire really quick for everybody.
Hey, Jason, you might have to move a little bit to your left, so that way your name isn't blocking all the greatness that you're doing. Unless
Oh,
that
how's
down for
over
a second.
here? Is this good? Great.
Yeah,
You're
I
good.
think that's
This will
good.
work.
You're good.
Great. So right there. Cool.
Hello,
Also, we
faceless
on the
man in the
garments.
corner.
Yeah. The garments that we produce, they're designed to keep the separation. Like for instance, in your torso, it's longer in the pant and it's longer in the. So this gel right now is room temperature. It's quite comfortable, and I feel like I'm swimming. It's a little bit of a mess the way that we're doing it, but I'm gonna do my very best. So right now, I have 2 layers of our heat shield, and I'm just gonna get rid of the excess. Normally this would be done at a 10. Also, I have thumb holes here, and once this is on and kind of dripped off, you do this at the tent. It's very very thin. So also I have to say I had shoulder surgery, and so my shoulder I can't lift my arm very well. So I'm fine now. I'm into physical therapy, but I'm already into like my 9th week, my 8th week. So now after this, we'd end up putting this on here.
The frog tog.
The frog tog goes on after that. And so this is obviously going to be very loose. And then we would end up taping this and getting all of the air out. And with that, I'm able to this is now this is just a normal cotton rag, and I'm going to put this over as though it was wardrobe. And this has been treated also with fire block. And so we're going to see kind of how long we can go ahead and burn. That's all right. Don't worry about that. Oh yeah, go ahead and grab me that.
That was just for your hands.
Great. Oh, for my hands. Thanks, boys. I was misunderstanding. So there's this. I'm gonna put this over. Fuel, please. Thanks. And we're gonna see
I know
what we get out of it.
everybody's quiet, waiting on the
And
flame.
the reason,
This is
so
exciting.
the reason that I'm doing all of these layers kind of in front of like a nice clean burn. Go ahead and let's light it up.
Ready?
Yeah.
Lighting.
Go. So
And
get
Rally.
nice flame.
Oh wow.
Wow.
And we can go ahead and count it. I move it around. I have no idea what we're at. But really, right now, my face radiant heat is hotter than my arm, and so I'm just standing here, kind of letting it cook. And this system is thin, but also it's a very effective system because it will keep my wrist from getting burned if all of a sudden my arms were to go up. And the reason I'm having to lift my arm is because this is my bad arm. But you can see how long this burn will last.
Jeez.
Almost to the point where it's boring.
Be
Are you
careful with
feeling
that.
any
What's
heat
that?
whatsoever?
No. In fact, I'm gonna get another rag and I can light it again, and I'll just be on fire this whole conversation. What is this thing? An hour long, right?
Oh, awesome.
No. So some of the and the reason I'm doing it this way is that I want to. I'm not feeling any heat, and I can let this thing go. I don't know if it's too boring. You guys let me know when you want it out, and I'll have the boys pull it out or put it out. But I wanted to also show. It's like the biggest problem that we run into isn't it's the fuel. We run out of fuel more than we run out of protection at this point. And so it's one of the things in
Now,
the longer burns that we deal with. Also, I have some on my hand, and so I can just kind of put my hand through it, and so it's good for protecting your skin, just in a general sense. I just kind of do that.
well,
So
that's another
as this
thing I
thing burns out,
definitely want to get into is the on skin burns. But before we do that, Relly, this seems like what you were explaining your setup with the wetsuits and the layers and the rain suit. Even
yeah. Let's
though everybody may have
give me
different
another one of
techniques,
these.
does this look similar to what you do as well?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, all you're doing is, you're creating a layer that delays heat transfer. And going back to what Al
Right.
said earlier, about if you feel heat, the moment you feel heat, you need to get down
Give me a
and
little more.
get put out, because even if someone hits you with CO2 or water where you feel hot, the heat transfer is going to continue for about 15 to 30 seconds. So if you feel hot, at that moment, if you decide to lay down, you're
Let me go.
possibly going to get burnt there anyway, even if you get water or CO2 there. Um,
Go ahead.
just as an
Interesting.
example, so I know we're going to show the clip later, but the first multiple burn sequence I did for Game of Thrones was actually in a bull ring in Osuna in Spain. And one of the problems with doing burns in the summer in Spain is that because you have the natural light, the sunshine, um, we were in an environment which was sand and the background was very sandy. If you didn't have a really good flame, you were, it wasn't going to be very impactful because you're going to lose the light. It's not like doing a fire burn at dusk where, the burn is really bright. So we went back and had about 4 or 5 different mixtures made up of flammable gel. And eventually, the special effects guys and the supervisor was Sam Conway. They managed to get almost a litre of IPA into a litre of gel. And what this meant was that we had a very big flame. And so we had a very big flame. It was about, when the performer was fully lit, you'll see it later, the flame was about 8 foot above him. And so the temperature in his sphere of heat bubble is somewhere ranging between 900 and 1200 degrees. So we needed the gel to be very, very cold, that's held between the wetsuit and the rain layer, so that we can delay heat transfer as long as possible. Coupled with the fact that we were also hitting them with a 45-foot flamethrower from a 100-foot techno dolly. So we needed to really make sure that we had these people as cold as possible. And what the wetsuit does is means that you can actually walk around and function as a human being. You're not stood there as performers who've done it with cold layers straight to the skin will know. You stand there literally shivering, and I think as Leslie or Dorinda said, you're just desperate to be set on fire. I can remember being burnt at the stake on I was being burnt at the stake on Da Vinci Code back in 2005, and it was the last shot of the movie, and unfortunately it came after the wrap party, so it wasn't a great way to go into a fire burn. But I can remember standing on the pyre, shaking, and they're like, "Are you ready?" And I'm so ready. Just set me on fire. I'm freezing. And
Well,
but it was a very, very windy night, and they had
Jason.
me reciting Latin while. Are you still there, aren't you, Jason? I could go on forever, Jason.
Yeah,
I could go on
man, I
forever
love it.
about
Keep
it.
going. I'll write it again.
Love it. That's perfect.
But
Oh, funny. Well,
And
So
Jason,
actually,
before
sorry, go.
before we kind of keep moving on, one of the things I did want to focus on was we talked about the different gels and the different time links that we can burn now with the different gels. Um, Jason, you did
Go get some
one of
water
the
so the smoke
attempts
kept the
at
smoke
one of
down.
the world. I guess it's not even an attempt. You actually had one of the records for the longest burn. the Guinness Book. And I know that, somebody else it doesn't take long. Somebody else has stepped in and up that one. But I want to talk a little bit about the different fuels and where they kind of came from. I know you said they started in Australia, and Raleigh, tell me about what you know of as far as from the UK side, where your gels came from, and then Jason, if you would kind of jump in as well as far as what we know of, so you can see them
So
applying. I believe that's the
yeah.
fuel
Sure.
applying.
So
But
specifically,
I'd love to talk
So
about that.
we used, it's not very exciting. I can talk over this thing. So we use different fuels. We experimented with different fuels. We actually, this is the beginning of this is actually a solid fuel. And then again, the protection wasn't the problem. The problem was the fuel burning away. And then we went to liquid fuel because that was okayed by Guinness to have a continuous source. Um, and this burn went fantastic. I actually did do a second burn in the attempt to try to get my record back, and I made some mistakes that were more business than maybe scientific, and it failed, and I learned a hard lesson that day. But it also it humbled me in the sense that now we go different directions. And when you're doing a burn at 5 minutes, the dynamic of the heat transfer and the residual heat buildup in the material and all of those things. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Is much different than what we would do on set. We would never have to burn 5 minutes on set. That's like the longest, most boring burn that you could ever, possibly imagine, unless there's some sort of dynamic movement going on. So we used a combination of things for that world record burn, and we didn't use that combination for the second attempt, and that was the wrong choice. That's one of those human errors. Um, so, as far as the advancements in doing a record burn, like a very long burn, it's completely different than an onset burn. So the protection is obviously there, but the techniques that we use for those burns are much different than what would be probably tolerated with production and the time that it takes, and just all kind of the ins and outs. But it is possible to go. My goal is, I set a goal for myself. I'd like to walk 1 mile on fire. And so after I check everything else off my lists that I'm trying to accomplish, I hopefully during maybe sometime in retirement, it'll just be like a guy with a race car, but instead of a race car, I'll be building a suit just because I
Wow.
want to. Not because it matters, not because it's going to change the world, I suppose, but because damn it, I want to walk a mile on fire.
On the moon. So,
On the move.
in
Yeah.
addition to this, Jason, I'd love to kind of broach the idea as far as the skin on skin. I know we've got some footage of people doing burns for you with the
Oh, that's
gel just right
Stella.
on the skin,
Joe.
and so yeah, Joe there. I mean, that's amazing to me how we can do fire burns just on the skin nowadays. I know it's been around for a while, and I know it started. I know
Yep.
Australia has been doing it for a while, and but I mean, it's certainly amazing the technology how it's changed. Where can tell me a little bit about this the gel itself, the protection gel, and where it actually even came from.
So, so gels are much different than the standard gels, and even our standard gel is different than we don't chill our gel because it's bio based, and what we found is that the same thing that Raleigh was talking about is that the performer ends up getting tunnel vision. It cools the skin to the point where once the heat transfers, they're not able to tell you that they're hot, and you often end up with like a sunburn type of a burn. So we've shied away from the discomfort and of cooling the gel, but back when the Aussie gels were brought over, and there's a whole myth of where that came from, that there was a fire at a warehouse and there was chemicals being used, and the fire department shot water in there to put it down. The whole place burned down except a patch on the carpet didn't burn at all. And then upon research, they found that this chemical with water was a great fire suppressant. So whether or not that's true, I don't know. I'm only lying to you because I was lied to, but that's how it was determined there in Australia. And then the way that I've heard it is that Tony Caesar did a show there, brought it over, and a gentleman at Tri Science Ira, who's not with us anymore, started making it for Tony, and then the East Coast got it, and Gary Zeller started to do his own, and the gel
The Zell
era
gel.
was born. Yeah. Now the gel era is an interesting era in technology because it allowed for because we're kind of getting around like Al was using the cotton, the cotton long underwear, and later on Nomax, and Nomax came, DuPont started to produce it because of the space program. So there's a para aramid and there's a meta aramid, and so the metas actually in the fabric. And this is an interesting thing to kind of touch on. Is it a lot of the generations before, they would say, hey, you can't use polyester. It's plastic. It's bad. You cannot do that. It's a disaster. And now obviously we use plastic a lot, but Nomax itself is a plastic. It's a synthetic, and it's designed that when it is hit with direct heat or intense radiant heat, it off gases. And it off gases and it takes away that the oxygen portion of the fire triangle. And they found that, and Al touched on this, is that he found that his cotton sweats were better than the Nomax, and most likely it was because the material weight was not equal. But Nomax was originally supposed to be, lining for the spacesuits and the space shuttle after the Apollo fire. So, and they continue to produce it. I guess there was an agreement with the government and DuPont that they continue to produce it in like tonnage of quantity, so it was readily available, and that became the standard. And now anything that is what we use is determined or is referred to as Nomax, kind of like Kleenex. Like Kleenex could be any nose tissue, but it's still a nose tissue, so we call it Nomax. So that's just kind of the side note. And when we get into the gel itself is really what's important. That's what's protecting the performer. As far as the heat transfer is concerned, the residual heat buildup within the material, the material's ability to reject the radiant heat absorption. All of those things are really important with the gel itself. So you could use long johns now and put a really nice gel in it and get very similar results. And the more it's just like going to like Mount Everest or anything else, any other climate specific, right? Is it if it's cold weather or hot, it's the same thing. It's about thermal protection. And so the more airspace that you have between your body and that source, cold or hot, the more space that you have there, the better the protection is. So it's a combination, and the gel slows that transfer. So having a material that can absorb and hold copious amounts of any gel, whatever it is far more likely to perform. I mean, listen, I'm not gonna promote this, but I've heard that people use in countries that don't have access to these products, they'll use tapioca pudding. They'll make it cold, they'll put it on there. It doesn't mean you should, but it will slow the heat down, and it will give the illusion. And I know that sounds crazy, but if you just think about it, all we're trying to do is it's magic tricks. It's all magic tricks. And so we're trying to take physics and just make it believable that we are somehow defying them, but we are not. I assure you, any
Hey,
gel, any material, everything burns.
Al, did you realize that whenever you were, in your backyard trying to figure out what you were learning with your gel and putting your sweats on, that you were like an innovator and ahead of the time?
Well, there were people doing fires, but I wanted to come up with something different. A lot of, of course, none of the stuff that Jason has now was not around. Um, but I wanted two things were very important. When I used the silica soda, I was told to always let it air dry, don't machine dry, and it would keep it off of your body. The other thing is like we were just talking, making sure that you timed the event before you did the fire gag. Make sure and also the fact that the heat goes in, and as Riley said, when you go down, if there's going to be heat spots because the heat will continue to go in, and that's when any place you feel heat, you just tap yourself, and they hit it with CO2 again. Um, but all this stuff, I was like rehearsed, and I would time myself in the backyard. I wouldn't do full burns in the backyard, but I would do my arm burns and stuff.
Yeah, that was fun to watch. Don't play with
Yeah,
fire at home when you're a
yeah,
young kid.
yeah. I would put stuff on my arm with all this treated stuff, and then I'd set it on fire. And then if it got warm, I'd toss it off. That way, I wouldn't really endanger myself too much. And because I did all this constantly, I came up with some stuff that would work for me. And then as they came up with the wet stuff, with the ice and the wet stuff and the wet Nomex, it got better. And as Brett said, some of the that could even burn you too. And then of course they started coming out with the Austrian gel. And then I think half of the stunt guy bought some of that and kept it in the refrigerator. Um, it's just, I think it's just the fact that what Jason is talking about, you have to really experiment with this stuff. And I knew the lady that got burned very well with the chemical. And so I was very careful not to put any chemical wet on my body. That's where I came up with a 100% cotton sweat to keep all that stuff off of my body. And it worked until, of course, they started to come out with all that modern stuff. And I
Well,
started pulling away
things
from
we are very thankful for all the modern stuff that makes things change. You know, all of the new products and the designs that come out. Um, just talking about the modern stuff and the advances. Rally, you obviously are. You know, we talked about Jason and his world record. You have your own record that I kind of just want to touch base on and brag about you. Rally is a four-time Emmy winner, and I just kind of want to show a little kind of clip that you had that kind of shows a little bit about what you've done and talking about the big fires. So just take a look.
I'm always looking for the WTF moments. You know, I'm looking for the moments where the audience go, "Whoa, did I just see that?" You know, that's what I'm looking for. It's just trying to find that angle, that spin on something where it looks original and the audience feel like they're watching something fresh and different. They're not just being given the same rehashed version of something they've seen before in a different costume.
3, 2, 1, action! 1, 2, 3.
Wow. Like some of the stuff that we've seen on Game of Thrones is unbelievable. It's just amazing. I mean, you've taken the fire gags to just like an entirely new level.
Yeah,
So
yeah, thank you. I mean, Game of Thrones was a great vehicle for that. You know, I think I think our final total is ranging north of 180, maybe 200 burns in the 4 seasons I did, and that sequence you see there, which was in Osuna in Spain. I'll always remember being at a meeting because obviously at the early stages of designing these sequences, you sit down with the previs generally. And I think it started off with, the dragon burns one person, turns around, burns two people, turns back, burns another two people, and then burns one person. And the producers turned around and said, "What do you think about that?" And I said, "Well, not much really." And they looked at me, and bearing in mind this is probably my second week on the show, and I said, "Well, in my mind, surely the dragon should turn around, burn four people, then burn another six, then six more, and then we'd burn two people, but the two people at the end wouldn't have masks on, so we'd see we'd see their humanity at the moment." And it could have gone the other way for me, but there was a silence and then a nod of heads, and then that's what we did, and that's how it started. And fortunately, in subsequent seasons, I was able to build on that. I've tied a child to a wall and set him on fire. We've had a shield wall of 20 soldiers. We set them on fire, and then we set fire to lots of zombies as well. And finally, last season we need to do a really big dragging explosion, and we set fire to 22 people twice, which I believe is a record for film and TV. Certainly film and TV. I think 36 people were set on fire for an event in South Africa, but certainly for film and TV, Game of Thrones holds the record.
I think we have a piece of that. If you guys want to see it.
So this is the shield wall. That's the shield wall in season 7. If you look very carefully, bottom left, there's one performer not on fire, and he walks back. You cut out of it there, but there was one performer that just as the explosion went, he backed off. He thought he was lit, And then he was Bulgarian, and all you could hear is this frantic Bulgarian shouting, like, "You're not on fire! Get back in there!" And he backs up, gets himself back on fire, and then we have 20 out of 20 on fire.
Wait, play it again for us. Let's look. I want to see this guy.
So watch
looks
it.
great.
It's in the
It's amazing.
bottom left of frame. So
Yeah.
Sorry.
right, so watch this. So the guys get hit. Next shot. Here,
Over
bottom
there.
left of your screen,
yeah.
he's not on fire, and then he wanders back in and gets set on fire a couple of seconds later. And the reason that happened, this is the thing about doing fireworks. So all of those guys were being fully engulfed, and each one of them was stood above a tamar. And a tamar is like being stoves. You get a screw a cylinder in it, it heats your kettle or your pot or what have you. Each one of the guys was stood above one of those inside a metal cage. So what we did is when the flamethrower comes in, we then detted those tamars, which creates a 15-foot ball of fire for each performer. But the problem with that, prior to that, we did like a staggered explosion trail coming towards the performers. And because of the noise, because they can't hear very much and everything's muffled, he thought that the first bang of the explosions was him being lit, and it wasn't. It was the precursor to being lit. So this is the thing about firework, is when you're wearing a mask, planning what you're doing is very, very important, and making sure the performers know exactly what they should be doing on the countdown. They should be on 3, 2, 1. They should be holding their breath on 1. And they need to know, what they're meant to be doing through the count. And they also need to know how long they have to hold their breath on. Because if you call 18 seconds and the people come to put you out, it's going to be about another 5 or 6 seconds before you can safely take a breath. And I always have one safety guy per performer, and they always get a triple tap between the shoulder blades to let them know that they can breathe.
Yeah.
I was
And Raleigh, real quick, I know that on our end, I don't like because we also would implement breathing technology too. You'd have like a little pack on your back, and you'd breathe through this this respirator. But we shy away from it here because we've had those systems fail before, and you're locked into a suit and you're dependent on it. You can't breathe. So do you guys use the breathing systems, or do you just do the straw and holding the breath?
No, we use a breathing system. So we had really nice masks made by prosthetics, but the problem with the breathing system, with anything mechanical and electrical, it's a choice, and all of us that do this work, there is no definitive manual on exactly how you do something. This is all experience that has been passed on and developed from the days, and Al was doing it back in the day, and it's your experience on what you do. Personally, I would prefer to mitigate the risk with a mechanical or electrical failure with a breathing device, and deal with really good masks, really strong performers that are very, very calm, that know how to bite on the tube very gently without biting through it at the right time, and controlling that, and having very, very good safety guys that go in and look after the guys. So there are choices, and often the breathing devices are kind of go towards a longer burn, but I've never seen a fire burn on a film or a TV show that lasts for more than 5 seconds. So I don't really see much point in doing any more than 15 or 20. Because if you've got 4 cameras on it, you've got 4 cuts of 5 seconds, which should be enough to tell the story generally.
Yeah.
Right. Agreed.
Now, Raleigh, I'm not sure. You said 20 people was the record. Did you guys break that a couple of years after that with the? Yeah,
last year, season 8. If anyone's seen it, it's episode 5 where she blows up the castle gates. There's the whole the Golden Army stood there. So what we did is we had 22 people. So we had 17. We did one side at a time. So we had 17 guys in masks doing full burns, stood on tamars, and then in front of them we had 5 guys that were gelled up. And what we did is we lit the 5. The guys were bent over, and we lit them. But what we had is I had Ritter fans I had a Ritter fan on each of the 5 guys. So when he was stood there alight, the fan was on tick over. It just blew the flames enough away from his face, so we didn't have to worry about the wind, away from his face, so that when he was performing, he could be fully on fire, drop down to his knees, and the flame would go behind him. But behind them, we had 17 guys fully ignited. What that did, for every camera we set it up, you would have 2 or 3 guys in foreground, fully on fire, but you'd see their faces, very, very minimal amounts of gel because the flames were behind their head. But behind them, they had 17 guys in the background, fully engulfed, and you couldn't see their masks. So we're trying to go another level and let you see the humanity of 3 or 5 people in your frame with their faces screaming. Behind them, you have a whole background of guys fully on fire. And then what we did is we did that once, and then we moved it to the other side. So here you go. So we're lighting up those 5 guys in front. These guys don't have masks on, okay? So they're fully alight, no masks. Stunt guys in front of them, no fire. And then we ignite them with the cane wires. We've got guys in the front with no masks and guys in the back fully alight, and there's 22 of them in there.
Oh, wow,
So
that's
that's my-
incredible, Ralph.
Question,
Now, if you look there,
when I saw that,
thank you.
the
So
timing
what we,
for that, or the early boys being lit on fire first, and then
yeah.
the guys in the back. So were the guys lit earlier not in much danger? Of course they're in danger, but I mean the time frame of your countdown.
No, because it
So
literally was, everything's done on a very loud vocal count. So, and everything's timed. So everything ready. You roll all the cameras. I make sure I've got speed on every camera, and then it's all pre-rehearsed. And then so we did 3, 2, 1, light them up. So you light the guys. As soon as the guys are clear of the frame, it's 3, 2, 1 action for the explosion. So and I think we did a 15 count. So it meant that the guys that were lit, the 5 that were lit, were alight for 20 in total, and the ones behind were alight for 15. What we did discover is because we had a nucleus of stunt performers on fire, and each one of them had a safety guy to put them out. And not only did we have 22 safety guys, we had 6 guys backing up the 22. Then I had my 2 assistant coordinators backing up those 6, and myself. Everybody had a fire extinguisher in hand. And then you're looking to make sure no one gets missed. But what we discovered is that if everyone has a bubble of heat around them, the guys in the middle, the heat was so intense that the guys going in, putting them out, had to be as fully protected as the guys on fire. We ordered the masks with the Pyrex lenses and full fire suits because it was really hot in there for the fire guys. So it is really just multiples of one. If you're going to prep one guy for fire, it should take the same amount of time to prep 10, because if they all have the same amount of people looking after them. But we got to 22, and it just seemed like it almost feels like ridiculous to do any more than that. It just does feel unnecessary, which is kind of semi-release. I've got to do season 9.
Yeah. And nowadays, you're talking about once you've done 22. I mean, nowadays we do have some great things with CG that can help accentuate fire. I think I want to see the clip that we had with at the green screen. I noticed you have this. You're doing this one inside a sound stage, which is incredible.
So that performer there is a guy called David Grant, who's an excellent performer. That was about 35 feet, I think. And as you can see, that we built the box rig in segments. So literally, because obviously the danger in this is, no one wants to fall into an airbag which costs $20,000 on fire. And we all know that falling into cardboard boxes means you've got much more leeway for getting it wrong. If you get it wrong into a box rig, you're probably going to be okay. You get head first into an airbag, and you're in trouble. So we did this, but we built the segments of boxes that they went in. He was right in the center of where they split, and then we ripped them out and obviously put him out. We did it this type of stunt probably 4 or 5 times, and it proved very successful.
Yeah, that's my question about the fire. I mean, but then the boxes, they don't catch on fire, or do
Well,
they?
they could catch on fire, but if you have the ability to pull them apart, then we pull them apart as he hits. So as soon as he's hit, the boxes are only exposed to someone on fire for 2 seconds. And if you probably don't notice, but on top of the box rig is a little stuntman from Liverpool called Paul Lowe, and he goes straight. He's only 4'8", and he's on there. And his last instructions were, whatever you do, don't drop the fire extinguisher on David's head.
Oh my God.
For me, that was actually the biggest danger of that, was the guy with the fire extinguisher walking across the box rig, the boxes going, him falling, and him hitting the performer in the head with the extinguisher. That was way more a hazard than the fire, in my opinion.
Now we love the fact that CG can help us, and I'm sure everybody on this panel probably has their own ideas of how they feel about CG, how it's helped, or if it hasn't, if it has. So what do you guys think with the progression of CG? How's that affecting us?
I mean, from my perspective, and I'm working on Game of Thrones, and it had the VFX guys, Joe Bauer and Steve Kolbach are some of the best in the business. They would freely and gladly admit that fire just isn't there yet. It just doesn't look quite right, and anything that we've had to enhance with fire, and there's been a couple of sequences on Thrones where it was absolutely pouring with rain and everything was soaking wet, so it didn't matter what we did to light things, everything steamed and nothing really lit properly. Most of the boat sequences that had fire, they would enhance with CG, and it was no one ever looked at it and went, I'm really happy with that. So I don't think it's there yet with fire, but as VFX as a thing, I know that when I started in my career, 25 years ago, there was this consensus that, VFX in 25 years, you won't have a job, it'll all be CG. And that's actually the complete opposite. We now are working hand in hand with CG. And if you take something like the Battle of the Bastards that we did, that to my knowledge, was the first horse battle where you left gaps for CG events to happen that you couldn't do for real. And that's VFX and CG across the board. We can now use that. We can use real action, real organic physical action that a computer can't really generate. But amongst that, we can put VFX stuff in there that we can't do. And when it's all happening, foreground, midground, background, you can't really tell what's real and what's augmented. So I think it's more of a collaboration than a challenge that it was meant to be.
Yeah. Well, guys, I hate to say it, but believe it or not, we are out of time. This has been such a great conversation on the evolution of stunts, and I'm so thankful to each of you guys. Al Jones, Brett Jones, Jason Domenico, and Action Factory, all those extra hands that popped in without heads. Thanks to all you guys.
Come say
Rally
hi, guys.
Yilram.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just come in.
Thank you,
just come and say
guys.
Thank you,
Thank you for having us.
Barb
Hey,
and Dave.
these are the boys here. Now they have heads. Yeah, there they are. So I dragged them in early to make sure that we had stuff. So yeah,
and,
thank you guys.
You're welcome. And just one thing is, I love the fact that we were all sharing tips and tricks. And like Raleigh said, there's no one way to do a fire burn or fire stunts. And hopefully together we can all share these experiences and these tricks and these tips so that we're doing the best job we can as a group of performers. So thank you guys. And
thank you,
Barbara. Thank you,
Barbara.
Thank you.
And the Academy. Thank you so much, you guys.